My colleague, Dr. Suzanne Morales-Vale, and I are very excited today to be joining with you for this informational webinar on the Texas Reskilling Support Fund Grant Program. First, some housekeeping. We're in a Zoom webinar setting. That means your cameras and microphones have been turned off. If you have a question, please use the question and answer box. We are planning to have chat box disabled, though I can see that a number of folks are greeting each other through chat. We want to be able to monitor your questions and answers, and you'll be able to see your questions at the top of the Q&A box. We will address your questions during the presentation. This presentation is being recorded, and it will be posted on the THECB YouTube channel. The PowerPoint will be made available on the THECB Reskilling webpage following this afternoon's meeting. So with that, I would like to introduce Deputy Commissioner Ray Martinez.
Thank you, Sherry. Can I test my volume? Can you hear me okay, Sherry?
You're terrific.
Great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of my colleagues here at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, I want to welcome everyone to this important webinar and to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. Commissioner Harrison Keller, who I will introduce shortly, often talks about how in the aftermath of responding to COVID-19 and building our economic recovery here in the state, he says, quote, "Jobs will follow skills." And that phrase, I think, really highlights the importance and the essence of the need to have a program such as the Texas Reskilling Grant Program. Developing this RFA was a truly collaborative process. Together with my colleagues here at the agency, particularly Dr. Stacy Silverman, our Assistant Commissioner for Academic Quality and Workforce, Dr. Sherry Rannis, our Program Director in our Workforce Division, and Dr. Dakota Doman, who is a Senior Director for Strategy and Policy here at the agency. Over the last few months, we've engaged with a large number of external stakeholders statewide to get a better understanding of what the various regions are experiencing regarding workforce education as a result of the COVID-19 health crisis. These meetings were informative, they were revealing, educational, and certainly very instructional. We engaged various practitioners, academicians, and college administrators from 6 different community colleges, 5 four-year institutions here in the state, our Texas State Technical College system, as well as employer representatives. We're excited for the positive impact this RFA will have on workforce education, and we're confident that each of our grantees will contribute to identifying best practices and innovative solutions. Ultimately, our aim is to work with each of you to serve the best interests of the students who will be the recipients of these important grant funds. So thank you all for your interest in being here and in joining in our collaboration for this important RFA. It's now my great pleasure to introduce the Commissioner of Higher Education for the state of Texas, Dr. Harrison Keller. Many of you already know this, but Dr. Keller is a 6th-generation Texan with more than 2 decades of experience in educational budget and policy, in digital learning, senior university administration, management, fundraising, and building effective coalitions among school districts, community colleges, university systems, and of course with policymakers. It's through Dr. Keller's visionary leadership and of course with support from Governor Abbott's office and other state leadership that we're able to offer this significant opportunity to our public institutions of higher education across the state. At this time, I'll turn things over to Commissioner Keller. Commissioner?
Thanks, Ray, and good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I'm Harrison Keller. I'm Commissioner of Higher Education, and I appreciate the opportunity to share just a few opening remarks with you today. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic's caused significant disruption to your institutions, your students, the Texas workforce, and for our agency. Our students and your institutions, of course, continue to face significant challenges and uncertainty. And I've been emphasizing to our state policymakers that this has been the greatest disruption to the operations of our colleges and universities since the end of the Second World War. Yet in the face of these unprecedented challenges, our Texas institutions of higher education continue to rise to the occasion. I commend you on your efforts to keep your students, your faculty, and your staff safe. The changes that you've already made on your campus have been effective, including putting large classes online, staggered class schedules, sanitizing and emphasizing hygiene, masks, social distancing. And I appreciate that your campuses continue to review and improve your plans through the rest of the semester and into next year. Since the beginning of this crisis, the coordinating board's primary role has been to act as a resource, partner, and advocate for the campuses. So in particular, we've been collecting and disseminating information to help our institutions navigate the disruption caused by COVID-19. We've been working closely with the governor, legislative leadership, and other agencies to provide regulatory flexibility to help institutions adapt. And we continue to support our higher ed institutions to help them ensure continuity of operations and instruction for our students. One of the most significant actions we've been able to take so far on behalf of our students and your institutions relates to $175 million in CARES Act funding that was entrusted to higher education by Governor Abbott and legislative leadership this summer through the Governor's Emergency Education Relief, or GEAR Fund. The biggest portion of these funds, $150 million, was allocated through our agency to the institutions to maintain our major state financial aid programs, to provide emergency aid to students, and to provide financial aid to help people reskill and upskill. Today, we're focused on $46.5 million of financial aid of these GEAR funds that we're distributing through the Texas Reskilling Support Fund, which will provide financial aid support to students who've been significantly impacted by COVID-19. These grants will be awarded to public higher education institutions to support displaced workers who need to reskill or upskill to get back into the workforce, and students who've previously stopped out of higher education institutions without completing a post-secondary credential. I'm very excited about the potential of the Texas Reskilling Support Fund. In today's economy, as Ray noted, jobs increasingly follow skills. So this strategic investment through your institutions is designed to put more students on track to achieve the kind of education and credentials that they'll need to participate in and contribute to the recovery of the Texas economy. Today, you'll be hearing from one of our strategic partners in this work, Marcella Escobari of the Workforce of the Future initiative at the Brookings Institution. Marcella and her team have been working closely with us and with assistance from our colleagues at the Texas Workforce Commission to help us understand who's been especially impacted by COVID-19 and the kind of reskilling and upskilling pathways that will help individual Texans, their communities, and our state accelerate economic recovery. So today you'll see the first iteration of a new tool we'll distribute to help distill information about current and potential future labor market needs. We're excited to share this work with you today and deeply appreciate the ongoing partnership with Marcella and her colleagues. So in closing, before I hand off the discussion to our team, I'd just like to underline one final point. So I spent a lot of time talking with my counterparts across the country and with our Texas higher education leaders and state policymakers. And the discussions that we're having today in Texas about reskilling and upskilling reflects a powerful commitment from our state leaders that you're just not seeing everywhere else. So to me, it illustrates that despite the unprecedented scale of the challenges that your institutions and our communities are facing, our Texas leaders recognize that higher education has a special role and responsibility for driving economic recovery. It's one of the most important ways that we're going to get through this and emerge with a stronger and more resilient workforce for the future. So again, I want to say thank you. We look forward to participating with you and your institutions on this important initiative.
Thank you, Commissioner Keller and Dr. Martinez. First slide. Thank you. The Texas Reskilling Support Fund grant program stems from the allocation of $175 million provided to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board from the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, also known as the GEAR Fund. GEAR dollars, in turn, originated from the U.S. Department of Education's administration of the Educational Stabilization Fund in the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, also known as the CARES Act of 2020. The CARES Act was signed into law on March 27th, 2020. The Texas Reskilling Support Fund grant program is intended to provide essential emergency educational support to students that have been most significantly impacted by the novel coronavirus and aid in the continuation of their education and economic recovery, much as you've heard Commissioner Keller speak about earlier. The slide you see here outlines specifically how the funds have been allocated. Note again that the great majority goes for direct student support and student financial aid. Next slide. When we think of the reskilling and upskilling landscape, these three factors are important to consider. The most vulnerable, 4 million of our fellow Texans have some college but no credential. That's 21% of the population ages 25 to 64 and 23% of the population ages 25 to 34. The economic crisis. As of October 17th, 2020, nearly 3.7 million Texans have filed for unemployment since mid-March. And finally, retraining capacity. 66,207 technical certificate and associate degrees were awarded in Texas in 2019, as well as tens of thousands of short-term credentials. GEARS funds can provide crucial financial assistance to Texas students impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic who are seeking to reskill or upskill to re-enter the job market. Next slide. As mentioned earlier, another important consideration when developing this request for applications, including hearing directly from institutions of higher education and other stakeholders. To this point, coordinating board staff conducted a number of interviews with leadership from a diverse group representing community colleges, technical colleges, and universities, as well as Texas employers. Next slide. The Texas Reskilling Support Fund grant program was established to provide essential emergency educational support to students that have been most significantly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and aid in the continuation of their education and economic recovery. Reskilling grants to institutions support displaced Texas workers who need to reskill or upskill to get back into the workforce, and Texas students who have previously stopped out of higher education without completing a post-secondary credential. Reskilling grants will allow institutions to provide financial assistance to Texas students through coverage of student tuition and fees. The grants will support students pursuing high-value workforce credentials and undergraduate degrees who are near completion of their post-secondary credential and re-enrolling to complete that credential. I will now pass it on to Dr. Sherry Rannis, who will discuss specific details regarding the Reskilling Grant Program.
Thank you, Suzanne. We're going to talk about the bones, the structure of this grant competition now, starting at the highest level, which is the fact that this is a competition open to all public institutions of higher education that are 2-year and 4-year institutions and technical colleges in Texas. The funds that are going to be granted to institutions must be used exclusively to cover student tuition and fees as last dollar awards, and be deployed as rapidly as possible by grantee institutions, because indeed these are emergency funds. The grants grant funding that is given to institutions must be expended by the end of calendar year 2021. And unexpended funds are going to be expected to be returned promptly by the end of February 2022. Next slide. The student awards themselves are structured in a particular fashion as well. First, they are last dollar awards, as mentioned earlier. These last dollar awards are calculated then after all federal, state, or institutional gift aid has been received. The award size must not exceed an eligible student's demonstrated financial need. As we said, the purpose is for coverage of tuition and fees. And the amount that can be given to students is between $500 and $2,500 per semester or term per student, but not to exceed $2,500. Award sizes are at the discretion of the institution. For example, an institution could decide to change the award size over time for a student that is progressing through the calendar year. So you may start off giving someone a certain amount between $500 and $2,500 in spring term 2021, and adjust that amount in the summer and adjust that amount again in the fall as that student progresses to complete their degree. Next slide, please. This is an area where we've received a number of questions so far, and it's an important part of the construction of this grant opportunity. It's the eligibility of students and what's required for a student to be considered eligible is what we're going to talk about right now. Eligible students must be Texas residents, eligible for in-state tuition. They must have filed a free application for federal student aid or FAFSA form. They must have financial need and be eligible for Title IV aid. Because we're allowing a certain kind of short-term program, credential programs to be included in this grant opportunity, not all of those are Title IV eligible. So what we're saying here is students who have enrolled in short-term non-eligible Title IV workforce credential programs, but who are otherwise Title IV eligible, may receive support. These students must have affirmed that they're affected by COVID-19. This is, after all, once again, it's about gear, it's about CARES. Institutions may establish their own processes for determining COVID-19 impact, but indeed, students must be impacted by COVID-19. They have to be enrolled in an eligible undergraduate or short-term workforce credential program. They can be either full-time or part-time. And this is crucial, they are re-enrolling. They are students who have not been enrolled in an accredited post-secondary institution in the previous academic long semester or previous 6 months, and they are also near completion. They are within 12 months of completing a credential program. We've received a number of questions since our initial posting about re-enrollment, and so let me talk a little bit more about that. So again, all eligible students are re-enrollees that have stopped out of their post-secondary credential program for at least the previous semester or previous 6 months and are within 12 months of completing their credential program. The definition of re-enrolled students is in Appendix A of our request for applications, or RFA. It states that re-enrolled students are, quote, enrolled students who are not enrolled in an accredited post-secondary institution in the previous academic semester or equivalent 6 months, unquote. It's important to realize that students may indeed have a gap of longer than 6 months before re-enrolling. However, currently enrolled students would not be eligible for this support without that term long or semester gap. Students may have stopped out for longer than a single semester or previous 6 months, or stopped out multiple times before they have re-enrolled, and that is perfectly fine. And students may have re-enrolled or have been previously enrolled, excuse me, in one or more different kinds of credential programs in the past. That's still fine. Students may be newer continuing students in their currently enrolled program. In either case, they must be re-enrolling after that gap and still be within 12 months of finishing their credential program. The 12-month clock for finishing starts when the student re-enrolls. In other words, students are eligible for aid as long as they're scheduled to complete their credential program within 12 months of re-enrolling. We've had the question asked about, like, when do we actually start the clock? And we think the registration date for re-enrollment is probably the best option there. Let me give an example. Students re-enrolling for spring semester, that is January, February 2020, will not have been re-enrolled anywhere during the fall 2020 semester or the equivalent of the past 6 months. Students enrolling in the summer or fall of calendar year 2021, that is re-enrolling, unless they're continuing from that re-enrollment in spring, have to be not enrolled at least the previous semester or 6 months. So there's also been a question about again, a little bit more about completion. Students' credential programs may end after December 2021. That is after the end of this grant period. But support for their tuition and fees can only take place during calendar year 2021. And another somewhat similar question we've been asked, students do not have to technically be dislocated workers to be eligible for support, but we think a great many dislocated workers will be eligible for this program and should be served by this program. Next slide, please. Eligible programs. As we've mentioned before, there are two kinds or two categories of eligible programs under this grant opportunity. The first is a high-value short-term workforce credential program, and the second, undergraduate degree programs. Let me talk about the high-value short-term workforce credential programs first. We call them short-term because we think of them as being 60 semester credit hours or continuing education unit equivalent or less. And that means that credential programs that have been converted or to credit or stackable to credit bearing programs, very, very short programs, are eligible as long as they are convertible and stackable to credit bearing programs. This includes level 1 certificates, level 2 certificates, level 3 enhanced skills awards, and advanced technical certificates. So these categories of sub-associate credentials. We have also suggested, and we'll go into some detail with our Brookings colleagues, and we'll give you more information about this, that these are considered high-value workforce credential programs. And the way we would like to make sure that you ascertain this, because the rationale for your selection of what a high-value credential program is very important to this proposal, to these applications. Those eligible high-value workforce credential programs must either be aligned with high-value occupations in the region, in your region, as determined by the most recent Texas Workforce Commission Target Occupations Regional List, or as indicated by above average wages and strong job placement in your region that you have ascertained through examination of pertinent labor market data and information in partnership with your regional employers and in consultation with your regional workforce development boards. We're believing that you will need to do an examination of data, research, and consultation to be able to have a robust, clear, and grounded in data analysis and explanation of why you picked the programs you picked. And as I said, we'll discuss resources available to help you make that case in a minute. Undergraduate degree programs are associates and baccalaureate programs that an eligible student's prior academic credits will enable the student to complete within 12 months. And that, again, your rationale for selecting the programs that you select are an important part of your application for this grant opportunity. Next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about the construction of the award sizes. In the RFA and also in the application, you'll see this chart. Let me explain it. The first diagonal, award size, indicates the different brackets of award size. There are no requirements as to when and how you distribute this amount of money to students throughout the year. You can front load it, you can spread it out evenly. We have absolutely no requirements about how the money will be spread out over semesters and terms during the 12-month grant period. We just ask that you use it during that 12-month grant period. And you will select your bracket based on the minimum number of students that you feel that you can support. That's the unduplicated number of students that are supported during the 12-month grant period. And it represents a pledge on the part of you as an institution that you hope to support at least this many students. And as we have described earlier, since the award size can vary between $500 and $2,500 per student, you'll be able to mix and remix the number of students that you'll be able to support during the calendar year. This, as I said, is a minimum pledge. The category of maximum number of awards, this represents the maximum number of awards that we at THECB hope to make or plan to make, depending on our application pool. So how is, what if you are deciding you want to do a partnership or a consortium rather than a single institution grant application? How would that grant request be composed? Each institution will select an award size that matches the estimated number of students they will support. And the lead grant holder may request a supplemental award, which we'll talk about in a minute, That grant award requested will be the sum of all the amounts of all the partners or consortium members, plus the supplemental award. So the maximum size of an award per institution is $1.55 million, but the actual grant size could be much, much larger depending on the size of the partnership consortium. Okay.
Sherry, I just have a quick question here that's somewhat related. If an institution is part of consortium application, can the institution also apply as an individual institution?
We're asking that everyone do a single application at this point. So you will have to make a choice.
Thank you.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the supplemental awards for partnership and consortia. And because this is we're dealing with very complex and evolving issues related to the delivery of post-secondary education and training during COVID-19, we're encouraging institutions to think about collaboration with each other among public higher education institutions to form those partnerships or consortia. The leading institution for a partnership and consortia, the holder of the grant, so to speak, can request a supplemental award of up to $50,000 in addition to the main award that covers tuition and fees. And that supplemental award can be used for additional coverage of more students, tuition and fees, the public outreach and marketing that you might want to do to let people know, let students know or potential students know about this opportunity, training, say training across institutions or within institutional systems to let people know how to talk to students about this opportunity or bring them to this opportunity, and the institutional research that will be, might actually be, we think, a very rich source of activity within the institutions, across institutions, and across our state. So all of those kinds of costs can be put in a supplemental award budget. And we expect to make about 15, up to 15 supplemental awards to support partnerships or consortia. It's important to remember, though, that as with, this is a very important piece of most grant management, that supplemental award must be used to supplement and not supplant the use of existing funds from federal, state, local, or institutional resources. Please keep that and bear that in mind. It's a very important stipulation. You can't, in other words, if you had someone that you wanted to do a particular task and they're already their funding is already set up, they would not be supplemental, but rather supplanted. If money from this grant would be used to support that person. So it would have to be new hires, for example. New hires for positions that have not been in place before. Next slide. That's the supplemental award slide. I'm sorry, Ernest, I messed that one up. We'll do the following one. Selection criteria, exactly. All right, here we are. I'm going to talk a little bit about the selection criteria, which, again, all of this is very detailed and stated in our RFA. So we're kind of running through what in a kind of a fast fashion, what's said in the RFA. There are 4 core factors that'll play into selection criteria for our review and evaluation of grant opportunities. The first is the degree to which the submitted plan matches our program priorities. The second is the strength and clarity of the rationale supporting the selection of high-value credentials and undergraduate degree programs. As I said, that's a very important piece of this effort. The strength and clarity of the aid distribution plan, because this is rapid. We want to understand your capacity to be able to identify students and get the money to them. And finally, tracking your track record or assurances regarding the capacity to identify and track the students that you're providing support for. Because in fact, this is an incredibly important moment for us all to understand what our students are going through, but also what support does and doesn't do for them. It's a very important thing to be able to identify and track, and we'll talk more about that in a minute too. And we'll also talk more about the resources that we hope that you will use to select those high-value credentials and undergraduate degree programs, including the work that our Brookings Institution colleagues have undertaken. Next slide, please. The additional selection criteria, these represent, in effect, bonus points, are another 4 criteria. The first is compelling additional information about COVID-19 related needs of your students and your plans for outreach to prospective students. We think this is very important because this is after all about people in a very difficult situations, and we want to be able to appreciate and understand what you're trying to address on your campuses. The second is a plan of action to deploy funds rapidly. Rapid deployment means ideally during the spring and summer semester or first terms of 2021, the first 6 months of 2021 if possible. So those who are able to get more money out the door more quickly or will get a few extra bonus points for that. And as we mentioned before, partnerships or consortia with other public institutions of higher education are also will also receive bonus points. Finally, if your institution has 30% or more of its enrolled students with at-risk status, you'll get some additional bonus points. In the RFA, we talked very specifically about what that at-risk category entails. It includes students who receive Pell Grants, those who graduated with a GED as opposed to a high school diploma, students who are 20 years or older when they first entered a college, students who started as part-timers and took fewer than 12 hours of credit, students who had SAT or ACT scores that are less than national average, excuse me. You may use any one or more of those criteria to calculate your 30%. If your institution has both graduate and undergraduate students, please use your undergraduate numbers only. I think that makes sense. So those are the 4 additional selection criteria bonus points that we will use in thinking through your applications, evaluating your applications, and determining who gets the grant award. Let's look very quickly at the application itself. Next slide, please, Ernest.
Carrie, before we go on to that, let me just ask real quick. On the supplemental award, those funds can be used for expenses outside of tuition and fees, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and they gave a quick example, an employee to identify and track and manage the grant.
If that employee is not currently employed and it's a new position, yes. A new position distinctly for this. And again, you need to pay very close attention to supplementing, not supplanting an existing cost to your institution. And if you want to talk more about it, we'd be happy to go through those supplanting and supplanting restrictions with you. Okay, the application itself. One tip, by the way, it's a very rather simple Adobe PDF. Some people have been maybe having a little bit of difficulty. Be sure to download the application form and use your PDF viewer so you can edit it and save your changes. And if you have difficulty with the form, just please let us know because we're going to try to troubleshoot that as much as possible. All right, the portion or the different segments of the application are as follows. The first is a certification page where your leadership signs and says, yes, we want to do this. This is absolutely what we're going to do. We're committed to doing this. The second portion is the grant request that we talked about, where you're going to compose the amount of dollars that you're requesting based on how many students you hope to serve. A third section is a simple, straightforward contact information about who's going to be in charge of your institution's project or partnership or consortium. Then there's a section on project summary, where you will indicate which credential programs you've selected to support. You'll describe how you selected them. You'll give a description of the distribution plan to students, and you'll give information on student identification and tracking. When you're giving the name of your credential program, it's very important that you give the name, the type of credential it is, and its zip code, its CIP code. It's the identifier that we use will be crucial, I think, both for your purposes and ours going forward. For short-term high-value workforce credentials, be sure to use the categories when you're talking about what type of credential is. Use the categories of credentials outlined in the GIPWE, in the Guidance to Instructional Programs for Workforce Education. We want to try to keep the names of these things, which are very often in the field used rather loosely, standardized and similar enough that we can track them. And for credential programs that are credit converting or stackable to a credit bearing program, please indicate the name and zip code, not only of the program itself, but also the name and zip code of the credit bearing program that the credential program is articulating with. Very, very important. Okay, next page. So the next section is the description of the applicant or applicants themselves. You're going to be providing a rationale for the request, a little more information about the level of commitment that all of you have determined made you interested in this particular opportunity, and the rationale for the partnership or consortium if you decide to go that route, and how you'll share responsibility among you. The assessment of need speaks to those bonus points we spoke about before. It's about, this is a location where you can talk more about what you think your students' situations are and why you, again, the compelling reasons behind why they need support. The last two sections are fairly similar. They're about projected timeline and estimated number of students supported. Again, you're not signing on the dotted line, but you've committed to helping, say, 500 students over the calendar year 2021. Give us a sense of where you think and how you think that's going to be spread out over the 12 months of 2021. And finally, you're going to certify whether you have met the 30% at-risk student definition that we talked about just a few minutes ago. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the resources, and then we can have an opportunity to meet our colleagues from Brookings. We're hoping that applicants will consult data resources to determine high-value workforce credentials and their undergraduate degree programs. And we've mentioned the Texas Workforce Commission's target occupations list, regional list that comes out multiple times during the year, and other labor market information listed here, like institutional research on labor market trends that you may have in-house, labor market information and discussions that you can have with employers, local workforce boards, and your employer advisory committees if you're a two-year institution. Again, if you're a two-year institution, your Perkins Comprehensive Local Needs Assessment, which was a 3 to 3 year strategic plan, or your WIOA, sorry, I'm going to say it right, WIOA application, has information about your strategy and your targeting and your prioritization of particular credential programs. Finally, our new tool that we would like you all to learn about, which is currently called the Texas Workforce Development Toolkit. It's my pleasure to introduce Marcela Escobari, who's a senior fellow at the Global Economy and Development Program at the Brookings Institution and a leader of the Workforce of the Future initiative that's there. Marcela has had a distinguished career, incredible career in global development and workforce. Among her past appointments, she was assistant administrator for the Bureau for Latin American and Caribbean at USAID during the Obama administration, a senior advisor to the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth, and executive director at Harvard University's Center for International Development. Fantastic, really. We are so pleased to be in collaboration with her team and to have her here with us this afternoon. And along with Marcela, we have Ms. Isha Shah from the Brookings Institution as well. So I'll pass this over to you, Marcela and Isha.
No, thank you so much, Sherry, and also to Suzanne, Lori, and the coordinating board for the opportunity to be helpful at this critical time. And thank you also to the Texas Workforce Commission, who have been very thoughtful partners as we put together this first phase of this tool. So 30 seconds on our research and how we hope it's helpful to you in this RFA process and hopefully beyond, and then we'll give a very short example of the tool live. So our research at Brookings centers on how cities and regions, each with their unique capabilities, can grow in a way that creates good jobs, and how can workers access those jobs and see wage growth throughout their careers. So we use network-based predictive models, which really just means we look at past trends of a lot of data and use specific attributes as you as a place, or maybe as you as a person, to determine what to expect in the future. So for example, your past career can determine possible upward moves in the future. So, and that's the work that we're visualizing here. It's our work with over 200,000 job to job transitions of how workers get long-term mobility that we hope to make available to you as you decide how to focus these stimulus funds. So this is a crazy time. You know, we don't need to tell you. Hundreds of thousands of workers in Texas have lost their jobs, over 8% unemployment. And also for those entering the labor force, it's a new and more difficult market to navigate. So we have seen, you know, dramatic job contractions across the board, but there's some unique pandemic-induced changes, right? We've seen a lot less retail jobs, and many of those jobs won't come back. And then some surprising growing occupations, right? From dentists to logistics occupations to many digitally enabled jobs. So we want to give you a sense of that nuance with a bit of real-time data. So this is a simple tool, and maybe Isha, you can put it up while I give a little bit more description and see if that works. So we want to give you in this tool information about the attractiveness and the growth potential of certain occupations. And we have there both target occupations and as well as all occupations that are specific to your location or your workforce development area when possible, to help you focus on what might be the most, you know, highest value credentials based on that demand, which is one of the stipulations in this RFA. And this is meant, as Sherry mentioned, to complement your knowledge of what is happening on the ground, right? Or test some hypotheses that you might have of opportunities in the region. So there are four main pieces of information that we're making available at the level of the occupation. One is around quality, and here's average salary and mobility potential. And this is economic wage mobility in a medium term, a 5-year term. And then information about the demand. And here's the size of the occupation or the contribution of that occupation to your region, previous growth, expected growth, and also demand during the COVID period. So things that are mostly declining and then the few things that are growing. So that, and the hope is that you can use this as you select the program so that you focus not only, which is the most important thing, of getting people back to work as soon as possible, but also, you know, what moves, what occupations may also provide benefits in the long term, right? And skills that as much as can be future proof, which at the end we also believe will be a competitive advantage for the growth of different regions in Texas. So with that, let me pass it to Isha, who's going to give you one example, and then we're open to questions.
Thank you, Marcella. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to do a very quick demonstration of how the tool works. And my colleagues and I will also be very available to you should you have any questions after this demonstration or in the weeks after. So there are basically two main parts, as Marcella mentioned, along which we're measuring job quality and job demand. So all of the information we have here is locally sourced, with maybe one exception, and it corresponds to each of the 28 workforce development areas within Texas. So as an example, we'll take Borderplex first. There is an option in our tool to include just the target occupations or all occupations. And you'll see here that the plots that we have can include up to 430 occupations, or as is the case in Borderplex, just the 54 TWC target occupations. And so what we see here is a simple matrix of demand and quality. And as Marcella mentioned, demand here is comprised of both historical demand and projected demand, provided down to the local workforce development area by the TWC. And quality is measured by the local median wage of a given occupation and the midterm mobility index. In other words, how likely is it that this person will move on to a better paying job within the next 5 years? So we envision higher education institutions using this tool in maybe two different ways, although there are probably plenty more use cases. The first is if you already, say, have in mind a certain credential or degree program that you have a sense is valuable. You've seen graduates go on to high-paying jobs and get placed immediately, but you don't maybe exactly have, say, the historical growth numbers to support the trends that you've seen. So as an example, we can put in computer systems analyst, and it'll be highlighted here within these dots here. And so if you hover over it, you can see a few metrics that you might want to cite in order to make the case for why a credential that supports someone towards moving towards a computer systems analyst occupation would be a high value credential. So we can see here that it contributed to about 1,000 jobs over the years from 2004 to 2019. And from 2018 to 2028, it's projected to add another 280 jobs, again, within Borderplex. If we want to maybe get a little bit more detail in say, citing that computer systems analysts occupations are high mobility and high quality, we can see here that the median wage is $37.30, which is above the $18 an hour median wage that is the case for Texas as a whole. And we can also see here that computer systems analyst is once again in the upper right-hand quadrant, which means that it has done above average on historical local job growth, and it is also projected to continue doing above average from 2018 to 2028. You can see here that the previous growth from 4 to 19 is about 58%, so the occupation has grown quite a bit, and the projected growth, again, within the same workforce area to 2028 is 10.3%. It looks like the current demand measured over the COVID period from January to September of 2020 has been declining, as you can see for a lot of the red dots here. So we anticipate this being sort of one use case in which you already have a specific occupation in mind. A second use case could be if you don't have a certain occupation in mind and would just like to maybe survey the universe of occupations and the credentials that they could help support. In both of these cases, you would want to really look at the upper right-hand quadrant in both quality and demand. So for instance, we can see here that registered nurses are far to the right, meaning that they're experiencing very high demand and are above average in the quality threshold as well. So we can see the same here. We can see software engineers as having high hourly median wages and high mobility. For here, for example, we can see physical therapy aides, a small occupation, but they have experienced substantial job growth over the period and are expected to continue experiencing job growth. And finally, to wrap this up, I will also demonstrate this download data tool that we have here, in which you can see, again, the occupations and all the figures local to your workforce development area. You can sort them by whichever metric you choose, whether that's wage, mobility score, or just even the quadrant that they're in. Like we mentioned, the ones in the top right-hand quadrant are high quality, high demand. After you've selected, you could go ahead and download the Excel file and do sort of whichever analyses you wish to do from there on. So again, if you have any other questions about this, I'm very available, and so are my colleagues. And yeah, we're very, very excited to have the opportunity to put this tool together for you, and just are seeking to make it as useful as humanly possible.
Thank you, Aisha and Marcella. At this point, wow, what a really robust tool. I'm sure all of us are eager to get to dive more into it. At this point, let's see if we can do a quick poll and gauge interest in a future webinar that would demonstrate this tool in greater detail. So you can see very simple here. How interested are you in attending a future webinar that provides more information about the content and use of the Texas Workforce Development Toolkit? So we'll give you just a couple of minutes here to indicate your interest. Okay. And Ernest, are we able to see the results? Oh, there we go. All right. Well, it looks like 75% of respondents are very interested, and another 24% are somewhat interested. So I would say that would be a very strong yes. So thank you again, Aisha and Marcella, for this great demonstration of this tool, and we're very excited to learn more about it. So at this point, Sherry?
Right, we're going to talk very, very briefly about a couple of other housekeeping details, and then we're going to flip to questions. First, the grantee reporting schedule. If you all receive a grant, we'll be doing that 3 times during this grant period. These are the dates to pay attention to. The program reports and financial reports, the details of them will be given to you if you receive a grant. I'm not going to go into them right now because of our, I want to be mindful that we want to switch to questions. As I mentioned, unexpended funds will be expected to be returned to the THCCB promptly by the end of February. And one other element, if you are a grant recipient, in service to sharing best practices and the ongoing capacity that we need to build in Texas regarding reskilling, and to support post-secondary students in Texas, we're asking awarded institutions to participate in research and information sharing efforts going forward. That might include data collection, webinars, conferences, or regional meetings, which we will determine. The interest seen in this tool, for example, and the holding of a future webinar would fall under that category as well. The idea that we have a lot to do, a lot to share, a lot to learn. So if you receive this grant, you'll be signing on to become a cohort, I think, of institutions that where we will learn together into the future. Next slide, please. And this is the application calendar. October 21, we released our RFA. We had our informational webinar today. Friday, close of business, 5 p.m. Central is the last day for inquiries. Then our application deadline is November 12. And we plan to make public announcements before Christmas, well before Christmas. Grantees will be informed a little bit before that. We do public notification after the paperwork is complete for a grant application. With that, next slide, please. I'm going to go into questions. And I notice we have a lot in our question box, right, Suzanne? So I want to reassure everyone, we're not going to get to all of your questions, obviously. However, I'm encouraging everyone to use our webpage, our website that we've set up for questions. So if we don't get to yours, or you don't feel like you've heard the answer that you were seeking, please do use that. It's available and open to you through Friday, close of business, and we will be prompt in response. Absolutely. But with that, Suzanne, let's see what we can address right now.
Yeah, so Sherry, there are a number of questions, kind of a variation. For letter A of the application form, credit-bearing credential table, can we include programs that have the potential to transfer to credit programs, or is this strictly for credit-bearing, parentheses, academic, and not for continuing ed credit programs for the college?
So again, we're going to ask you to keep in mind the spirit of this grant opportunity and what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get students 2 degrees, to complete a credential, to have a credential within 12 months. And so we're asking that if you're doing these very short-term programs that are very often, not usually, but very, very often continuing education courses, that they be stackable or convertible. No, there's just like no other option really. We do want students to learn from you. They learn in lots of different ways, but this particular grant opportunity is to reskill and upskill students and displaced workers and support them as quickly as possible. So with that spirit, it's got to be credit convertible or credit stackable.
Thank you, Sherry. There are also quite a few questions regarding a very important cohort, and that's military students. Are military students who are given a waiver for in-state tuition residency able to use these grant funds?
That's a really great question, which I don't have an immediate answer to. Something that we'll actually look into. So if you have that question, please post it on our website and we'll respond. And not a
okay.
Yeah,
and then let's see. Yes. Okay. So supplemental funds, supplemental award funds can be used for a single institution to conduct a specific marketing campaign to inform students of the grant funds available for those who stopped out and are within 12 months of high value credential, correct?
No, actually, it's marketing can be done by any members of the partnership consortia. The supplemental grant will be held by the lead grant institution, but no, the idea is that you'll be able to support your partnership consortia, so all of your institutions could potentially undertake marketing or outreach activities for students.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Sherry. So, since an institution can only submit one application, please explain the benefits of applying as a member of a consortium if your institution is not the lead partner receiving the supplemental award. Doesn't this limit the institution with regard to which programs can be targeted? For example, can you include students in programs which do not transfer to the consortium partner?
That's a really great question. I think it really depends on what the premise is for the formation of your partnership or consortium. What if you're creating a consortium, for example, for health-related fields? Some of those may be, and by the way, these could be 4-year partners with 4-year partners, 2-year partners with 2-year partners, 2-year and 4-year together. All those configurations are possible as well, right? What if you've decided as institutions that you're partnering or creating a consortium around a particular field? It really won't limit you. You'll be able to do quite a number of different kinds of credential programs and provide hopefully smart rationale as to why you selected that cluster of occupations or that cluster of credential programs. Does that make sense? I don't think you're limiting yourself.
And remember, of course, the students who are receiving these funds are certainly more likely, because of the financial assistance, to complete, which of course is always a benefit, not only to the institution, but certainly to the state as well.
Absolutely. It's a core piece of our 60 by 30 tax.
Here's a real basic question. What beginning semester should we solicit potential students? Fall 2019 or spring 2020?
Well, you can't give out dollars to students unless they're re-enrolling. It begins in spring 2021. That is January, February 2021. I also, by the way, I don't want to be unsensitive. A lot of shorter terms, semesters, it doesn't have to be a traditional semester length or term length, right? You may have many, many semesters and terms during the calendar year 21. But what it'll behoove the institution to figure out how to find students for spring 21. But you'll have time to figure out how to do outreach for summer and fall 21 is the way we think about it. I think that's the answer to that question.
So here's a question related to non-credit programs, and based on your prior answer, we would assume these are non-credit programs that are stackable or convertible. Are books, supplies, and certification tests allowed under fees for these non-credit programs that are stackable?
Not really, no. I mean, it depends on how your institution is I guess, defining fees, but we're thinking in a very traditional terms in terms of what tuition and fees would be. So no.
Looks like we had a number of comments regarding the toolkit. Toolkit looks phenomenal. I think this toolkit, just to comment as well on that, would be a great supplement as you consider your application.
Absolutely. We're hoping that you'll be able to use it. It will be posted. You'll see that this is the direct link to the application. We're also going to post it on our Reskilling at highered.texas.gov site. So there'll be a link there as well.
Okay.
And we have time for maybe one more question or two.
Okay, actually, this is pretty basic, I think. Do participants have to be previously enrolled, or can they be enrolling for the first time?
Okay, so this notion of students have to be re-enrolling. So they have enrolled in the past. Doesn't have to be at your institution, doesn't have to be in the degree program that they're going into now, but they are re-enrolling. So in the sense, they could be new to your school, but they are re-enrolling. So they have some credit in their Tucker bag, so to speak, and will be able to complete. And this is particularly important for associate and baccalaureate degree candidates.
And I think I have one final question here. can we apply these funds to supplement an existing grant designed to offer workforce assistance to those suffering from COVID-19?
I'm not sure how this would work as a supplement to another existing grant. This is a very particular grant for a very particular purpose, to cover tuition and fees for students. That's it. That's the purpose of the money. If you can tell us or explain to us that you have additional funds that are being used this way, and boy, the power that you're going to be able to bring against the needs of your students is even greater, terrific. But this money is being used for this particular purpose from this particular source.
Okay, and I do want to mention there are a couple of questions regarding the actual PDF application. So certainly please feel free to reach out directly
Absolutely.
to Sherry and her colleagues, and they'll be able to help you. Would you recommend conservative estimates for the number of students we may reach?
Golly, that's such a wonderful question, but I'm not going to answer that. You absolutely have to make a determination as an institution or as a partnership or consortium about what you want to do, what you think you can do. Because we've given you room to figure out what the size of a grant is to a student, between $500 and $2,500 per term per student per semester, right? You have room to organize and reorganize, but golly, the more students you can help, the better. That much I will say.
So Sherry, we're after our time period. It's 4:02. So should we go ahead and try to do a few more questions, or are we?
I think we've tried everyone's patience, but if you have a burning question, please do use www.highered.texas.gov/reskilling and send a question along to us. Reskilling@highered.texas.gov will also work. That's a mailbox, and we'll respond to you as quickly as we can. Turn it around. Read the RFA carefully. It's a lengthy document, but it's a good document. It has everything, all the information you'll need most of the time. If there's a question we can't answer right away, we'll research it. For example, the question about military veterans was a really good one. Thanks everyone. Thank you to the commissioner. Thank you to our colleagues at Brookings. Thank you, Suzanne.
So Sherry, will you be reaching
Isha?
out regarding a possible additional webinar, or?
We'll stay tuned to this channel. We will let you know about whether we are going to be able to put one together in time before the application is due or sometime afterwards. This is a tool that's not going to disappear. It is now, as the commissioner described, in formation. This is its first iteration, but it's an asset that we all know that will be incredibly useful going forward in all the work that we do, not just this particular grant opportunity. So yes, that's something to be looking forward to. Thank you, Marcella. Thank you, Isha, for your support. And thanks to the THECB team and all of you for participating in this webinar this afternoon. It will be posted on YouTube, and the PowerPoint will be available at our Reskilling website. Thanks again, everyone. Have a good evening.